Well, good evening, ladies and gents. We are moving now toward the end of the month and consequently also to the end of our present series on the Arthurian myths, so that we have one more talk to go, which will be primarily about some of the contribution to contemporary mythological understanding of the great American mythologist Joseph Campbell, to whose message I am greatly attached and whom I regard as having been an immensely important influence in mythological studies. And then we will make up our mind of what we shall discuss in the coming month. In fact, I had the intention of putting out a piece of paper, which I shall do later on, where if you are so inclined you may note your interest in some subject matter which we may pick up in one of our future discussions. Also, the issue at this point being that next month also we will take, I think, at least one Friday off, which is will be our annual Montségur Day celebration for the Cathars, which takes place usually on the Friday as the Friday which is the nearest to the 16th, but that will be available along with the entire schedule on our usual flyer and also on the internet. So with that, I think we'll begin our discussion of a particular figure in the Arthurian myth who is in certain respects quite different from the others whom we discussed, such as, let's say, King Arthur himself, Merlin the magician, and Lancelot, also most of the feminine figures who are truly, when one contemplates their characteristics, not as human as they might be. They are figures which certainly C.G. Jung would recognize, and I believe has in some of his writings, as archetypal figures which have a profound meaning in terms of the individuation or psychospiritual development of the individual. And when one studies their story, one can derive significant insights really into one's own higher and transcendental nature and the ways in which one can approach these. So really, when you study the individual figures of the Arthurian myth, you find relatively few with whom as ordinary and not particularly individuated human beings we can relate to. This evening's figure, who is Owain, the knight with the lion, this person, I think, is much closer to us and to our own individual development without kingship and without the high magic as we find with some of the others. First, I will briefly refer to an epithet, a characteristic by which this figure is described in the myths themselves. There are primarily two great sources. One of them is Chrétien de Troyes, and the other one is a British source, wherein he is always called the knight with the lion. And we will see the way in which the figure of the lion works into his story and what meaning we may derive therefrom. And as it is the privilege of the aged, such as myself, to reminisce, it seems that old events and old stories come to one with the greatest of ease after a certain age. But what, say, has happened earlier the same day or maybe in the last day, that doesn't come so easily. And therefore one concentrates on that which comes easily. So in this case, quite a long time ago, because it was, the reason I can tell it was quite a long time ago is because it was prior to the time that Mayor Giuliani had created some order in New York, and which was somewhat safe to at least walk around even in the twilight in Manhattan after that. But this was even before then, so it's a long time ago. In any event, I was giving a public lecture in New York in a fairly large quarters, and it was not only my my immediate theosophical crowd from the New York Theosophical Group or from the Jungians, but there were quite a large number of people there with all kinds of backgrounds. And my talk was inspired by and bore the title of Joseph Campbell's, at that time, latest book, which is sort of a coffee table book, but as everything that Campbell did, very, very beautifully written and beautifully illustrated, called The Animal Powers. And so I spoke about the animal powers, and therein I was just sort of impelled to refer to the various ways in which even modern people or postmodern people and city people continue to relate to the animal, not only by having pets, but by wearing beautiful animal furs and sometimes having stuffed animals in their houses. The great Madame Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical movement, to whom I'm also greatly devoted, in her apartment when she lived there in New York, had a stuffed chimpanzee in the foyer of her apartment. And the chimpanzee was dressed up in evening dress. Had a top hat and all of that. And underneath she put a plaque saying, Charles Darwin. The old lady had a rather good sense of humor. But in any event, aside from the chimpanzee and all that kind of monkey business, let us say, I was trying to draw parallels between the interests and the symbolic behavior of people today regarding the animal kingdom and how that relates to earlier mythological concerns. In the front row sat a whole group, I would say maybe around 8 or 10 very nice looking and nicely dressed young ladies who just went into a complete state of ecstasy over my little comment on the animals there. And I wondered, what's with these ladies? Well, I didn't know, of course, but when the lecture was all over, some of them came up to me and they told me that they were all young women who worked in the furrier industry. In other words, they were dealing with and selling animal furs. And they were just absolutely ecstatic that I did not excoriate them as nasty, terrible people who deal with animal furs, but I related certain archetypal motifs to these matters, including the wearing of animal furs. Now, why I brought that up exactly, I'm not so sure, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. However, let's say the relationship of the human to the animal is much more ancient, much more complex, and in many ways much more powerful than we imagine. And certainly it vastly exceeds the undulating patterns of humans availing themselves of pet animals, which comes and goes. When you have a difficult situation like we just had for about 2 years, and when people are, for one reason or the other, confined to their own quarters and their immediate neighborhood, and all of a sudden the number of pets increases incredibly. I have not had any direct information about it, but I would hazard a bet, if I were a betting man, as they say, that there are more dogs and cats living in Beechwood Canyon than humans. And once a year in our Gnostic church we revere Saint Francis, and on or near the festival of St. Francis, we have a blessing of the animals out here in front of the door. Well, the last 2 years, which were of course the COVID years, on St. Francis Day, we had 180-some dogs that we blessed, and a smaller number of cats each time. There was even a one time, I think, when it was closer to 90, indicating how many people here have pets. Now, all of this is related to the circumstance that the relationship of the human to the animal is a complex one, and it certainly, like so many other subjects, it extends in a very profound and meaningful way into the symbolic dimension. So that animals are not just animals, but animals are symbols. And in their symbolic meaning, they bring a great deal of insight, energy, joie de vivre very often, and meaning to the human. So we find that particularly in historical periods when people may have had some pets, but when they lived very close to nature, and when the forests, which were vast in many places in Europe, they really covered just what now would be several countries in some instances, and these forests were of course filled with wild animals. And the people had frequent contact with these animals, some of it by hunting, which was really one of the main sources the obtaining of food, and therefore of very great importance, but which also brought people closer to both the physical and the symbolic dimension of the animal kingdom. Now, that all being said, we need to keep in mind that particularly in the age of chivalry, which is the one that we are dealing with in the Arthurian myths, let's say the symbolic dimension of the animal was of great importance in ordinary life. I don't know how much you have been acquainted with the rather obscure and arcane subject of heraldry, which is the study of the coats of arms which go back to the time of knighthood, and which were the emblems of various knights and subsequently their descendants and their families and of the nobility, and which predominantly embody animal motifs. I can testify to it myself because my family's shield contains a single figure, which is a stag, the deer with all the antlers jumping over a fence. And other relatives and friends of mine have other animals. Among these animals, curiously, of considerable prominence are some which are either purely mythological, cannot be found in any forest or maybe in very few zoological gardens even today, but which are very common in heraldry, and certainly among them is the one who appears prominently in this evening's talk, which is the lion. Now, to my knowledge, and I'm not a zoologist, I don't think there is any evidence indicating that there ever were any lions walking around in Europe. Yet the heraldic devices of countries and of families are replete with lions. Of course, with England we have the lion and the unicorn, in immense number of countries at the present time whose national coat of arms is a lion, including Belgium, which I always wondered, when were there ever any lions walking around in Brussels? In any event, this is in itself is a strong indication that in an age when people were still much closer in their consciousness to the symbolic dimension, they were also very greatly involved in animal symbolism. And so we need to keep in mind to some degree that while we are not purely the heirs of the animal kingdom, in our physical nature we certainly are. And William Butler Yeats, in one of his wonderful poems, sort of bewails, I think, the human conditions to some extent, and describes himself as one who is riding on a dying animal, meaning the body. So we do wear, let's say, biological organisms which are the descendants of the animal kingdom, and in the case of Yeats, which, let's say, have have a shorter lifespan than we in our consciousness envision and desire. Of course, very few people desire a short lifespan unless they are really very unhappy in this world. But let's say that also needs to be considered. If you had any pets, dogs, cats, which are the most common, then you set yourself up for a certain amount of grief. Not necessarily for any other reason, but the pet animals have a lifespan much shorter than the general lifespan of the human. And therefore you are going to have to suffer through the demise of your pets, whom you may have had a very high regard for, but from whom you will have to part as in the course of a natural necessity. And in a figurative sense, we might even, and I'll quit these cerebrations in a minute, we may also consider, as Yeats did, that we, the transcendentally derived and psychologically infused being who lives in his consciousness are nevertheless conjoined with an animal, with the physical body. And that this makes us perhaps that much more responsive to the issues, and in this case the symbolic dimension of animal symbolism. And so I brought that up in order to make perhaps the relationship in the story of our friend Sir Owain and his lion more understandable to us and to perceive its symbolic dimension. Now, I will, departing from the pattern that I have set with a great deal of explanation, I will launch right into the story, and nevertheless we will contemplate the symbolic dimension, not only regarding the lion, who becomes sort of the, well, you might almost say the archetypal pet of our hero, but in other respects as well. Now, the tale of the Knight with the Lion begins, like so many other Arthurian legends, begins at King Arthur's castle, which in this case is not the well-known and much publicized Camelot, but Caerleon upon Usk, which is of course still present. Now there several knights, among them Owain and his two closer friends, Kynon and Kai, and let's see, there's a number of others there, but Owain is certainly there. Owain, son of Urin. They all are engaged in the noble pastime of something that perhaps we should be more often engaged in, mead drinking. As well as the munching of I'm not entirely certain what these are, but they seem to be very fond of it, munching broiled collops. What is a collop? In any event, it's something good and probably of a fleshly nature. Collops of meat. And last not least, the noble art of storytelling, which I am sure that if it were more popular and more widespread today, would redound greatly to our benefits in periods of history such as the one that we have just gone through. The Knight Kynon tells a curious story of one of his own most recent adventures. This is now not Owain, but his friend. On one of his travels, he came to a mountaintop, where in an open space he found a tall tree, and under the tree a fountain, and by the fountain a silver bowl. He then took the bowl, and scooping up some water from the fountain, he cast the water upon a marble slab that was near the fountain. And then he experienced something unusual. Immediately a terrific storm broke with shower and hail, which terrified him and menaced both him and his horse. If you have been around horses, then you may remember that horses don't take with a great deal of joy to thunderstorms. I have often been caught as a child when riding out with my parents or others on summer afternoons, late afternoons, when the thunderstorms came in, somewhere out in the forests of northern Hungary, and we always had to get off the horses and try to quiet them down and put them into as much as we could find in a sheltered place. When the rain showers passed away, in this case, our storytelling knight noticed that the great tree lost all his leaves, or its leaves, and the countryside seemed devastated. And then the sky became clean and the countryside was transformed by a new kind of spring, which I think was conceived as not seasonal. Many birds came and sang a transcendently beautiful song, and then a murmuring voice was heard through the valley saying, "O night, what has brought thee hither? What evil have I done thee, that thou shalt destroy my possessions thus? The shower thou hast caused has left in my dominions neither man nor beast alive that was exposed to it. And along came a black knight on a black horse." Now this is part of the action now, who fought with Kynon and unhorsed him in combat. He then took his horse, and the poor knight had to walk home on foot to Arthur's court, which is always a calamity if you are a rider, because you don't like to walk. That's what your horse is for. So, meanwhile, a young Sir Owain hears this tale from his friend and forms a resolution to go the same way. He wants to experience what his friend has experienced, even though it was a somewhat terrifying experience, and he wants to see how it might affect him. Since now he left eventually the court because he wanted to go to that same place and to have the same or similar experience. So what, however, does the tale mean so far? Now, on a peak stands a tree. Next to the tree, a fountain, with a silver bowl. Now, even in postmodern psychological circles, there has been a nomenclature devised some years ago that was called a peak experience. So the mountain peak is something that stands out in the countryside, and so it signifies here an experience that is uncommon, that stands out among ordinary experiences, and that one should pay attention to. The tree is undoubtedly a tree of life, although not Kabbalistic. The water of the fountain is also the water of psychic life. The cup, like the grail, is the chalice within which feeling or emotion is contained. If you have some acquaintance with one of our favorite modalities of fun, which we exercised just a couple of weeks ago, namely the tarot cards, then you will remember that it has a suit named Cups, and that it stands in its psycho-spiritual meaning primarily for feeling. And so the cup is the chalice of feeling, of emotion. When we dip into the well of the psyche, of our inner nature, of our invisible nature, when we dip into that and pour it into our life with the cup of feeling, there occurs what in some scholarly circles has been called by the Greek name a eucatastrophe. Now the ev, at least that's the way I learned it in my Greek, or the you means something good, like eureka. It's an exclamation of joy. Now, that doesn't mean if you go to Eureka, California, you are going to be necessarily very joyous, but depending on the circumstances, you might be. So give it a try if you are so disposed. But what you have here is an image in nature of transformation. It is death followed by life, because first the tree seems to die. Transformation, storm, and then there comes a new spring with the singing of birds. So the meaning here, the psychospiritual meaning here being largely that the augmentation of life requires death. And so when there is a destruction, there is a death. In this case, the death is in nature. This indicates that such events are an important feature of existence. That death and life are transgressive, and therefore they both must be accepted as being important and being real. Something that I think to a very large extent our culture appears to have lost, as the result of which we experience the sort of things that we have been experiencing in the last couple of years. There was a very commonly used phrase that certainly was everywhere present in ancient times, in the Middle Ages, and was still inherited by some monastic communities, such as one that I was familiar with, which is the Latin sentence memento mori, remember death, which might appear like a morbid injunction to some, but which I think has to do with wholeness. Because if we don't contemplate the opposites of life, probably the most powerful of which are life and death, then we are not good alchemists. Life and death are the kind of opposites that the alchemists have in the salt and the sulfur, or in the sun and the moon, the king and the queen, which are the various alchemical symbols. And therefore one has to be familiar with, and one should accept the reality and the existence of both. Now, of course, it is obvious to all of us that, like all living creatures, from the tiniest little insect on upwards, everything that is alive seems to have a desire to continue living. But I think, while I'm sure that little insects, whom I have observed often scurrying away from where you might step on them or otherwise do them harm, unlike these little insects, we who have consciousness need to include our demise and the demise of others, human and animal and even plant life, as a necessary circumstance of existence. If we are thus prepared, if we have followed the adage of memento mori, our ability to take the possibility of our own demise, the demise of our associates, or for that matter the demise of our pets. I have had to try to console more people about the deaths of their pets in my career here than I have about the deaths of humans. The grief experienced by people is very great. And so what we have here is the inclusion of radical change, including the inclusion of death in our calculations. So the knight who came there and who, unbeknownst to himself, has performed certain magical acts, taking the magical water, pouring it out and so forth, and thereby causing let's say, unusual events to happen, has been confronted with the changing nature, the instability, whatever else we might call it, of life, which is a set of circumstances that are very important to experience. Now, Sir Owain, who heard this story and was inspired thereby, decides to go out and try to experience this himself. So he sets forth, and he has, when he comes to the place, he has the same experience as his friend and predecessor, except for one difference. When, as you may recall, at the end of it all, a black knight appeared, Owain doesn't go away. He has a little more fighting spirit. He doesn't go away, but he charges him. He runs his lance through the black knight's visor, right into his head, into his brain, which was always a sort of a sure way of finishing off your enemy when they were able to do that. The black knight sways in his black saddle, and turning his horse, he flees from the battlefield. Now, here is the difference between the two knights. The first knight, Kynan, at least that's how I pronounce him, Kynon, was unhorsed, and then he returned to his domicile and to Arthur's court. The black, he was turned back by the Black Knight, by the darkness and evil, who tried to attack him, and he didn't want to fight the Black Knight. It was too much for him. So he did what many of us do when confronted with really stressful situations. He said, as it were, I give up. And he sunk back into his prosaic life. This is something that we are apt to do. When we are confronted with stressful and possibly threatening situations, we try to get out of them. And let's say if this reaction to the challenges of life and death is habitual with us, then I think that our lives are thereby greatly impoverished. In fact, I'll hazard a wild statement, which I just coined sort of right now, so I hope I won't have to repeat it too much in the future, which is that if one is that terrified of death, then one might as well be dead right now. And that's important to remember. How to get away from that kind of fear and that kind of apprehension, what the techniques are, I don't think I can tell you. But I can tell you that they can happen, because I have been in the company of people under very dangerous circumstances, and of course, as a youngster, 13 years old, I was among them myself, and I have experienced in my associates and in myself the absence of fear. Now, how we managed to do it, I don't know. I don't think we told ourselves, well, I'm not going to get scared, you know. I don't think that would have worked. So it must come from a more complex and more profound situation. Once again, I think the general worldview, what in German we call Weltanschauung, has a great deal to do with it. Maybe some of you are interested in works of art, and you may remember a famous painting by, I think it's by Dürer, Ritter, Tod und Teufel, which has to do with knighthood. And so the knight is riding forth, and next to him, on one side, is a rather terrifying figure of death, the toad, and on the other side is a demon, the devil. It's the knight and death and devil. And they are riding forth, and you can see that the knight, at least in believe it or not, you know, my family is a family with unusual tastes, let's put it that way. And my mother, of all people, had in her room a nice big reproduction of Dürer's Ritter, Tod und Teufel. And I, of course, being interested in unusual things, you know, usual things are not interesting. Usual things are too usual. So in any event, I really liked that picture. I was attracted to weird things fairly early. So I asked my mother, well, why do you have that here? And he said, because you see, we are all like that knight, and we have the prospect of death and the prospect of bad things, of evil, always next to us. And we still have to go on, even though these keep up with us. This sort of attitude, and I am not trying to convert anybody to the attitudes of my close associates, but this attitude, I think, has much to commend it, because we must go on and fulfill the tasks of our lives that accrue to us, not without the opposing and perilous circumstances that will come our way, but in spite of them. This, of course, has a great deal to do with, let's say, the principle, or one of the principal virtues of knighthood that we find in all of these knightly tales, namely courage. This is what we have here. On the one hand, we have the knight who didn't have the courage or the perseverance to remain there when the Black Knight came and departed. And then we have the other one who stood his position and remained there, and made the Black Knight flee. And this is an important issue. Owain is the stronger, and he is not defeated. In fact, he possesses he possesses the courage, and not only doesn't he go home now after this, but he pursues the Black Knight right to the Black Knight's castle. They come to a large castle, and the Black Knight charges through the gate with Owain in hot pursuit. But just as Owain is about to enter, the gatekeepers lower the portcullis on him. You know, the portcullis is usually sort of the outer gate which is attached to a mechanical device, and if you are beyond it but have not entered the castle yet, then you are really held there captive. So the iron portcullis does quite a bit of damage to Owain. It cuts his horse right into two. This is the sort of thing that happens maybe more often to people like the redoubtable Baron Münchhausen, to whom it happens in one of his tales. A cannonball takes off the rear end of his horse. And the way Münchhausen finds out is that the horse is thirsty and keeps drinking water and won't stop. So he looks back where the water is running out, so the fact that it's only half a horse there. Now, if these things sound a little bit strange to you, they are. But they are amusing, and I recommend the last movie of Baron Münchhausen, which was made here, the American version, which is very, very fine. So now, our poor friend can't go in and he can't go out. He is in a fine fix. Indeed, we might say in a fine mess. Then he sees a very helpful vision. It's not just a vision, but he sees something that becomes very helpful to him. It's a beautiful young maiden who approaches and who speaks to him very kindly and responds to his compliments by giving him a ring which has the power to render him invisible. Then the soldiers come and open the gate, and Sir Owain slips on the ring so they cannot see him. He becomes invisible and slips away from the soldiers, who are quite unhappy over seeing only half a horse instead of himself. The girl comes and she invites him in. And he is, of course, invisible. She gives him to eat and drink and makes him feel comfortable. He is now safely within the castle, which is called, interestingly enough, the Castle of Life, and is protected by, he himself is protected by a young maiden whose name is Lunette, rather in an English form or Latinized form Luneda, which, whether it's in French or in Latin, or it means the little moon. And when battling the opponent of transformation, we might say, excuse me, when we are trying to enter the castle where the important events shall take place, the Castle of Life, we get caught by the portcullis, neither in nor out. And what I think the symbolism of the story brings to our attention is that to be in such predicaments is part of life. And this, I think, also is points in a very important direction. Because while certainly we all have the desire for pleasure, after all, Sigmund Freud, the founder of depth psychology, of psychoanalysis, even gave sort of the principal motivating instinct of the human psyche and called it libido. Now, libido in Latin means pleasure. We even have I think, when we are confronted with somebody who is very intent upon having a pleasurable life, we call him libidinous. It is a very important instinct in the human. And so we definitely don't like things that are unpleasant. But we do find ourselves in course of the pursuit of life in situations where we are really caught. Like our friend is caught between the two portcullis, and our vehicle upon which we move is also then hurt and impeded. We are in the magic place of the unconscious. We are in the midst, neither in the world nor in the mystery. And this is, I think, a very important symbol to contemplate. It's a bad place to be in, and yet it is one in which, at one time or the other, pretty much all humans find themselves. And at any given time, many people are there. All the people who are seeking to escape life and consciousness in various ways. Low magicians, occult fantasizers certainly are among them, and also people who otherwise are convinced that their fantastic desires can come true. And humanity, by and large, is psychologically in a halfway house. They can't go in and they can't stay out. They want to get into the castle of life, because by going in the castle of life we receive the meaning of life. But we find ourselves in predicaments where we can't go in. And we ride only half a horse. This means that we are really nowhere. What rescues us from this state? Well, in this particular case, it's the youthful anima by the name of Lunette, the little moon. The moon is the more romantic of the celestial bodies. I'm sure you will agree. We just went through a full moon period, and so this has to do with feeling, with romance, with excitement. So the one who comes to his aid and gets him out of this terrible predicament is not a monk. It is not a professor who will teach him things, but a carrier of excitement and romance and love. Also embodying the importance of beauty. And she gives us the magic ring. You may have recollected when I mentioned that this ring bestows invisibility, the great similarity between this very old symbol and the Lord of the Rings of J.R.R. Tolkien. The Lord of the Rings bestows invisibility, as those of you who are familiar with the work will attest. But the invisibility is only one feature. It is the great ring. It is the ring of power. It is, it is really the instrument of transformation and victory over the dark forces of life. And she gives us the magic ring. And therefore, the enemies who are always there, or the enemy, can see us when we wear the magic, but we have to wear the magic of feeling. We have to wear the magic of romance. And I think this is where humans so often go wrong. Even, let's say, even some of the my occult friends, some of my theosophical companions and so forth, I could notice that they translated the initially extremely powerfully feeling-toned and romantic approach to spiritual things. They translated them increasingly into intellectual formula and things to believe in. And I used to get raised eyebrows and other signs of reprobation when I said, what's the point? If you believe in karma or in reincarnation, in what way is that going to really help you? It's just another belief. But of course they would not go along with me. And so it's very important to remember that all spiritual things, even psychological things, if you reach its most spiritual exposition in people like Carl Jung, the pursuit is a romantic one. In order to go toward the spirit, you have to have a sense of romance. You have to have a sense of excitement. You have to have a sense of being attracted, like a lover is attracted to the transcendental. If you don't have that, then you're going to be stuck on the bridge to the castle. Why so? Because that is where the energy comes from. That is what makes you move. Thinking doesn't make you move. And as one wise teacher said, one thing you have to remember about thinking, that thinking only leads to more thinking. The power of the thinking principle, of the thinking function is limited. And what is needed in conjunction with that, maybe with some guidance from the thinking principle, is the power of feeling. And that is represented by the young moon who comes to him and gives him the magic ring. This is very important. So as he's now led to a chamber in the castle, and he's comforted by the beautiful maiden, he hears a lot of noise and wailing and commotion. The meaning of this is that the nobleman who owns the castle is dying, and in a few hours indeed he is dead. He was, of course, none other than the Black Knight, whom Owain wounded and who then took off. Owain now watches the funeral of the Black Knight, and he sees among the mourners another feminine figure. I mean, if you want to inquire the ladies, this is the story where you'll find them over and over again. So this is a majestic lady, stained with blood, crying terribly, and she turns out to be the widow of the Black Knight, and is called the Countess of the Fountain. You may remember the fountain whereby so many of these developments came initially to pass. So instantly Owain becomes very interested in her, and he discloses this to the maiden Lunette. She says that she would secure the lady's attention and love for Owain. What an act of generosity. So initially one would think that she would be the love partner, but not. In fact, she says to Owain, "Verily she shall love thee not a little." So that's a pretty big promise. She says that to him, and she departs to talk to the Countess and to intercede in Owain's behalf. So a long conversation ensues, in which the Countess of the Fountain shows a great deal of reluctance to have anything to do with the slayer of her husband, but after all sorts of back and forth arguments, she finally follows Lunette to the bedchamber where Owain is resting, and after she takes a good look at him, she decides that she could really do a lot worse than this knight, this handsome and young knight. So after she consults the chief officers of the realm, she agrees to, believe it or not, to marry him. And so a great wedding feast, great nuptials are being celebrated. And so Owain becomes now the lord of the fountain, because that is the title, was the title of the now deceased Black Knight. So now we have two feminine figures, as you notice. The one is the youthful one, the girl archetype, the little moon, as she is called. She is representative, as it were, of feeling, of romance, of youthful energy. She is a mercurial figure, as we will continue to see. And Mercury, Hermes, in the Greek form, is the one who facilitates transformation, clear down into alchemy, where he takes on a chemical form. So she is here the assister of transformation. Such figures are very important. Mercury, the god Mercury, if you see his statues with the helmet with the wings on it, with his sandals which have the wings on them, and his scepter with the wings, he is a very mobile person. He is ever young, he is ever active, he is always mobile, and he with an element of androgynousness. Now this is the god Mercury. Here is, you might say, the magician priest or the magician priestess, and this needs to be kept in mind, because in whatever jurisdiction, in whatever religion, the priest is always a magician. Merlin is a priest magician. What this means is that those who go to the real priest find and seek initially, and then find not stability, not dullness, but the kind of stimulus that the mercurial transformation figure brings. Such people are different from all others, and we need to keep that in mind. What we need is not secure or allegedly secure dullness or dull security. What we need is not safety. What we need is transformation. What we need is stimulation that will bring about the desirable changes within us. And not just a presence that comes and tells us, oh yeah, you're going to be all right. You might as well say you're going to be dead. You know? And it's curious that we are so afraid of physical death, while at the same time we are experiencing increasingly, culturally and individually, an inward spiritual death. In any event, don't let me get started on that, because as you know, I can get pretty hot under the collar when that happens. But let's say, so what is important in terms of our inner life, but also in our terms with, in terms of our contact with our fellow humans, is this element of the assistance of our transformation. So what we need to find is the other human who can nourish within us the flame of transformative change, which we need to experience in order to come into the greater life. So this is a very important matter to consider. Transformation is more important than security. Transformation is more important than safety. In fact, the two somewhat exclude each other. When you are really safe and psychologically safe, physically safe, whatever. When you are convinced that you are really safe, you know that is not when you are going to change. That is not when you are going to transform. That is not when you will move toward your greater destiny. Safety, to a certain extent and in certain respects we probably need it. But safety on the whole is the enemy of transformation. It is the enemy of creative change. And yet, what is our life all about but the attempted fulfillment of creative change? If we cannot come to that in the course of our lives, then our lives have not been fulfilled. In fact, in many ways, our lives have been wasted. So what we have here now is the mercurial mystery priestess, the young girl, who leads him and who leads consciousness to another figure, the deep, matronly, powerful, Sophianic figure, the wisdom woman, who is the countess. She is the grieving widow, blood-stained, like the Mater Dolorosa of the attribute of the Mother of the Savior. She is not easily dealt with. She is not easily won. One cannot make a deal with her easily. It takes time. She is the Countess of the Fountain. She is the guardian of the waters of life, of psychic energy. But eventually she befriends him and she becomes his helper also. And we need to keep that in mind. Psychologically, what we are doing is dealing with our unconscious. You can call it anything else. You can call it the astral plane. You can call it this, that, or the other thing. But what it is, that while we are pursuing these deeper dimensions of life, we need to come to what may be called the waters of life, of the psychic energy. So the symbolism of the slayer of the old husband, that the old husband becomes the new husband, the new mate. The old is done away with. The unconscious eventually always yields to the new impulse of consciousness, if it arises and if it is properly channeled. And the unconscious yields to the new stimulus. It has to be approached by ever new ways of consciousness. And thus we are now lords of the castle, and all seems well. But is it really? No. King Arthur and knights back home are worried. What happened to Owain? Where is he? What is keeping him? Is he dead? So they go forth on a rescue party and come to the countryside where Owain himself has fought his battles and where he now holds sway. They come to the fountain and find a black knight there who fights and defeats them all in succession, all except Arthur and Gawain. So finally Owain and Gawain fight and the battle ends in a draw. Each thinks the other one has won, but really neither has. Now they make peace and come to the castle where they have a great celebration and a banquet. After the feast is over, Arthur sends an embassy to the countess, who never appeared at the feast, and requests that he may take Sir Owain with him to his kingdom. For 3 months, since, says he, Owain has been absent from Arthur's castle for 3 years already. So Owain departs from the realm of the Countess of the Fountain, and he arrives back at Arthur's castle. And what happens to him there? Well, he promptly forgets about his wife, the Countess, about the fountain and all of these matters, and he settles down at Arthur's court not for 3 months, as he promised, but for 3 years. And after that time, he is still not mindful of his promise. Now we have an image of the 2 kingdoms. There is Arthur's kingdom, the kingdom of the world, the ego, power, money, worldly obligations, career, and everything else. Bills to be paid, dirty dishes to be washed. And we leave it, as it were, in a dream. And we enter the other world of imagination, romance, wonder, magic, the unconscious. We get to the very heart of it, and we have great experiences. And then what happens? Well, what we saw happened, the ego world comes to get us. Arthur and Gawain and the rest arrive, and they trouble the fountain, and they clamor for battle, and we fight back. No, we don't want to get back to that world. I think that if I have properly expressed myself, probably quite a few of you will recognize your own experiences. When you have entered the magic kingdom, when you have touched the realm of transcendence, when things have changed in a magical manner, and then the world reaches out and tries to grab you and pull you away again. And the resistance against that is great. In fact, it can create considerable crises. The conflict between the inner world and the outer world is really the great battle of Armageddon that we all fight. All the time. But we have to be careful. We should not give in to the reducing of the intensity of our consciousness, of the greatness of the movement of the transformative impulse, in order to fall back into mundane life. This is quite important. And so we fight back. But eventually the opposing forces often get us, or get to us. Apparently we haven't paid our dues yet. So the mundane world, which in Gnosticism we call the archons, come and grab us and pull us back. We have forgotten them. Now they make us forget about the deeper world. We forget that we have become the mystic knight, no longer just a knight of the Archon. We forget that we married Sophia, that we lived in the castle of life, that we have been consecrated to become lords of the fountain of life. We forget. But can we really forget? That is the question. If we haven't really been there at the fountain, then we may forget, but not otherwise, because then we haven't really had the experience. For the magic kingdom will call out and claim us again. And indeed, it does it in the story also. So the real lesson here is that while it may times may come when you are drawn to forget the great experiences, when the mundane begins to take the place of the non-mundane, of the interior. But if you remember, if you do not lose contact with the ineffable greatness that you have once touched, then it will come to you again. So it's very largely a matter of perseverance, and within that, of course, there has to be the exercise of a certain spiritualized sense of values. We must, that is why it is important early in life already when possible, in childhood already, to learn how to value that which is superior and to value it above that which is inferior. The human being is a natural born mystic, although he doesn't know it. Why? Because the human being has the capacity within consciousness to reach to that which is out of this world, which is beyond this world, which is beyond the ordinary, which is beyond the usual, beyond that which we consider to be safe. We have that capacity within us, but it has to be exercised. And so when the temptations come to draw us back into the ordinary, we must have within us the strength and the valor to say no. I have seen and experienced, I have touched and I have tasted the extraordinary. And I will no longer be satisfied with the ordinary, no matter what rewards it may tempt me with. I have become a child of the great forces beyond, and I will not be dragged back into the present, into the dull, into the uninteresting, into that which is lacking in creativity and which ultimately leads nowhere. But that takes some doing, as you very well know. But these are some of the lessons. All through the Arthurian myths there are constant confrontations with the mystery, with the miraculous. And it takes a person with an unquenchable romantic desire for the miracle to continue in the direction of the miracle. And assure you, if you do, maybe not right away, maybe it'll take some time, but you will find your reward. It will come to you. And why is that so? Well, because this miraculous something that I am talking about, the magic of the greater life is not an inert commodity. It is not something that has no will and no action of its own. It's not the kingdom of heaven that is over there and you walk into it. It's not a static thing. But what it does, it reaches out for you. So that as you reach for it, it reaches out for you. And as a result of this double motion, your own and the motion of the greater world, comes about a linkage. like the two fingers meet on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel by the great Michelangelo, of Adam and the Creator. And you can see that something, some fire, some energy, some electricity passes there, and that it did because both wanted to touch each other. That's important for us to remember, because largely as the result of the age of rationalism, the age of science, all this sort of stuff that became very important and very powerful in the culture, sort of with the middle of the 18th century or thereabouts. All of these have tried to convince us that what we are involved in is not really conscious. It is not truly of a nature that will respond to us. That the world that transcends the physical is dead, even as the physical is dead. Because that is what materialism of one kind or the other brings about. All of a sudden you are taught that nothing is alive. And if nothing is alive in a deeper sense, then you are not alive. So you have to recognize that what you are dealing with is alive, it is conscious, it is a lot more conscious than you are, and that as you seek it, it seeks you. But this requires responsiveness. And that responsiveness has to be one of feeling, it has to be one of romance, it has to be one of desire. We have to desire the greater life. If you just touched it once, if there was just one little dream which showed you with its own intensity that there is something greater, that is something more miraculous, that is something more marvelous than what is presented to you by the outer world and by the media and by all the people who influence us and by all the propaganda of this kind or the other. There is something greater, there is something beyond, there is something wonderful, and there is something that as you reach for it, reaches out for you. So we cannot forget this greater life. For behold, one day while Arthur and his knights are at court, there appears another strange person, as these things also often happen. I mean, Arthur's court with the round table is one where the mystery intrudes from time to time. Something comes in that's really weird, and the knights look up and, goodness, what is this? The wild hunt, various things. In this case, believe it or not, there appears a woman in the midst of them. She rides a bay horse with curling mane and covered with foam. She wears a dress of yellow satin. Well, I guess she knows how to dress. She rides up to Owain and takes his hand and removes from it the ring which was placed there years ago by the Countess of the Fountain and her helper Lunette, and she says to him, Thus shall be treated the deceiver, the traitor, the faithless, and the disgraced. Shame to thy beard. That's a nice way of cussing at somebody, especially since now with the difficulties with hairdressers and barbers and everything, so many people grew beards. If you're angry at somebody, tell them, shame to thy beard. Now Owain feels disgraced. He is totally dejected. He feels he does not belong into either realm. He is not at home with Arthur in Arthur's court or with Arthur's court, and the goddess of the mystery has withdrawn her token of initiation from him, namely the ring. He is unfrocked, he is an outcast, he is nobody. So he leaves Arthur's court and wanders out alone into the wilderness, lonely, sorrowful, utterly at sea. Here then comes you might say, the punishment of the magic kingdom, followed by the dark night of the soul. We have deserted the divinities, what in ancient times were called the gods. We have not kept faith with the mystery within, and we are now told so. The dream, the vision, the voice within, they say this to us. We are cursed, we are excommunicated, we are nobody. Now we are excluded from the human and from the superhuman. We have found that there is really no way back. We cannot go home again. The grown-up cannot become a child again. The spiritually anointed cannot return to the world. It is no longer their world. They have no world, maybe, and they can be lost. So Owain now goes forth, as it were, on his second journey. This time he is no longer the adventurous knight in shining armor, and with his fine horse. He is feeble, he is poor, he is miserable, he is hungry. He dwells with the beasts, and like King Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible, he descends from the human to the animal state, the Babylonian king who was eating grass. I often said that to people who are, very wild about all these herbs and so forth. I read about you kind of people. You go down and eat grass. What is that going to do for you? They usually don't like it when you tell them that. They don't like it. So let's say on the great journey, we are all humbled. And this is really what St. John of the Cross, San Juan de la Cruz, who was the great counterpart of St. Teresa of Avila, the great mystic, referred to when at least one of the many things, because his writings always have a multiplicity of meaning, of the dark night of the soul. There comes a time when the consciousness withdraws from outer stimuli, and it's a dark night because you don't see the external anymore. You don't see the world. You don't see what is going over there, and hopefully you don't see television and you don't see the computer screen. Now that's the kind of dark night of the soul that I long for, when we don't have to see that. But in any way, there is a withdrawal now, so on the final great journey we are humbled. The first time when we went forth, we were young, we were confident, we were brash, and quite unconscious. We got to the fountain, but we were innocents. We were, we were sort of dummies, if you don't mind that term. Now, however, we know more. We know where the real thing is. To use a colloquialism, we know where it is at. So we are conscious, and we are also conscious of our limitations. That's the great problem with consciousness. Every time you take a step in consciousness and you are more conscious of reality in general, you are also more conscious of yourself and your silliness and your wrong-handedness and your lack of forthright courage and your lack of willingness to go on. And all of that you have to take and go on with it. What happens in this dark night of the soul kind of experience is that the hubris is gone. We are humbled. And in so doing, we regress to a level of consciousness. And there can be great crises. There can be great psychological crises at this time. I am not a psychiatrist or even a professional psychologist, but let's say I have encountered more people either on the verge or past the boundaries of schizophrenia because of this experience, when they have to turn and when they have to now move in this direction in a new way. So now Owain, of course, going forth, has further adventures. He is rescued once again by a great lady who has fallen on evil days and who is in need of help, since she has been attacked by a neighboring lord and most of her lands have been taken away from her. So Owain rises to the occasion and he helps the lady and restores her due to her. The lady begs him to stay with her, but he departs on a beautiful black steed, black horse, given to him by the lady. Thus he continues his seemingly endless journey. Once again we are strengthened by anima forces, by the need of the feminine, by the Sophianic figure. It gives us strength. It restores us to the human condition again. The ennobling forces of life, altruism, chivalry, aesthetics, good manners, these are the forces that make us sane and human again. So in the dark night of the soul, these are the factors that we need to cultivate. They're extremely important. In adversity, in alienation more than ever, we have to cultivate honor and goodness and nobility. Otherwise, we are lost. Not only do we regard the animals, regress to the animal life when we regard them, but we can become demonic. Now comes the remarkable scene. Owain comes into a forest where there are two beasts engaged in a combat with each other. In a narrow gorge is a large black lion. Before him is a cleft in a rock. In a cleft in a rock is a big serpent, the lion and the serpent. Very important magical symbols. Every time the lion tries to pass by the rock, the serpent darts out and strikes at him, trying to bite him. Now Owain decides to help the lion, and he rides up to the serpent and cuts him in two, which is usually not very pleasing to snakes. So the lion is not happy, is most happy, he is grateful, and he attaches himself now to Owain. So this is the time now where Owain acquires his own magical, mystical familiar, which is the lion. He brings him, he tries to take care of Owain. He brings him wood for his fire. He brings him game to cook and eat. and he becomes his helper and his defender through many adventures. They spend many years together in happy association and fellowship. So lest you despaired that the lion would never appear, this is when the lion appears. So Owain kills the serpent who menaces the lion. Like Siegfried and Tristan and Perseus and other heroes, he slays a dragon. The serpent is the dragon, the worm of the underworld who destroys consciousness. In this case, the serpent is the malign, the chthonic unconscious that poisons consciousness. It is a regicide, the killer of royalty, who tries to kill the king of the beasts, the lion. In return for slaying the dragon, as it were, Owain receives a gift, a mighty helper, the royal lion. My guess is that this has to do with the reintegration of the psyche with the totality, with the instinctual self. We find in Hume's Red Book, for instance, and also scattered through the so-called black books which are out now, that part of the individuation, part of the reintegration of the human, which is really the fulfillment of the human destiny, is also that there is a recovery, and the recovery of contact with the instinctual self, with the wisdom of the body, with the nature of with the nature whereby we contact physical reality. Because that also, let's say, the body has to also be part of the reintegrated human. But the body is not all that is important. The body is a part of us. If we could just convince the so-called scientists nowadays of that. You can have a body like, I don't know, do anybody of you remember Jack LaLanne, you can be a Jack LaLanne, you can be the picture of health, but that in itself is not going to do anything. And if that is what you are seeking, and thereby neglect the other, then you are in very bad shape. So the lion has come, and the totem animal. You know, many of the saints, if you look at particularly at icons, the icons are great teachers. The icons are the windows of the soul, as the Orthodox Church says. And you find there that great saints and even angelic beings have their own animal with them. Saint Jerome, for instance, has a lion. Saint Matthew has a lion. There are the Russian saints, appropriately to their climate and to their physical surroundings, very often walk around with bears. So the next adventure consists of Owain finding now his old friend and helper Luned, the lovely maiden. This is incidentally spelled Luned, so it's more Greek than English. She is now magically imprisoned in a stone vault because she helped him in the past, and because she persuaded the Countess of the Fountain to marry him, although he was unworthy and left her later. So she suffers too. He feeds her with meat that is caught for him by the lion, and cooked by wood provided by the lion, and the lion follows Luned and Owain just like a dog. Like by the friendly lion, they are by the dog-like friendly lion who goes with them wherever they go. They have further adventures, including one wherein Owain slays an evil giant who has tormented a family and had kidnapped two young boys whom he was about to devour like the true ogre that he was. The lion, always present, continued to help Owain, even after the lion was separated from him by being shut up behind the gate of a castle. He still continued to roar, and with his roaring he kept Owain alert, and later when the giant entered the castle, the lion finished him off. And thus we are once again recovering our feeling nature with the girl Luned who comes, the romantic helper who is rescued from the stone vault. Our feelings are with us again, and we are capable of much greater valorous deeds than before. Now we have three voyagers. Three people are involved now: Owain, Luned, and the lion. So the ego, the feeling-toned anima, and the instinctual selfhood, all pursuing the same goal. What do we have? We have here. We have individuation. We have integration, which is of very great importance. So the helper, the help that comes from the young anima, from the noble beast, the kingliness of the body, the instincts, wholeness, as I mentioned, includes the instincts. As it is said in the Gospel of Thomas, if I remember correctly, the holy man is holy altogether, down to the body. But the holy man is not the body, which is what we may add. So now the voyagers go forth to find a fourth, who is of course not known other than the Countess of the Fountain. So the great mysterious lady, whom Owain has so unfortunately deserted when Arthur came to retrieve him and take him back into the world. In the Welsh text, which is the Red Book of Heraldry, there is no more material given, but the final union or reunion with the lady being considered perhaps too profound a mystery to be told in words. Chrétien de Troyes, the courtly Frenchman, provided us with a needed happy ending, as it were. So these are the stories, somewhat confused and superficial, but they at least hint at the mystery. Once again, Luned takes the lead, and she goes to the Lady of the Fountain and persuades her to come out under the magic tree to the magic fountain once more. There Owain appears in their sight and performs the old ritual of pouring water on the stone, thereby causing thunder and storm to arrive. The lady is dumbfounded that this time there is no black knight to defend the fountain of life, and Luned cunningly leads Owain to her and identifying him as the new magical black knight who has returned and who asks to be admitted into the castle of life once more. The lady accepts him. They are reunited, never to part again. Their union is so powerful now that nothing can shatter it. They can even travel to Arthur's court, where they are received with great honor. And always the great black lion proudly follows them wherever they go, and Owain is known ever after as the knight with the lion. So what we have now is the concluding, the ultimate hero's gamos, the holy wedding, which is again accompanied and facilitated by the maidenly trickster, the feminine Mercury, the anima hetera. The lion never leaves, for the union of the sacred four is now the order of the day. The two ladies, the knight, and the lion. 4. So the worldly kingdom is no longer a danger, for we can live freely both in the inner world and in the outer. And this is the perhaps long and in some ways repetitive conclusion of the story of the knight with the lion. It is quite late. Let me conclude the conclusion then by saying that as indeed is the case with all the other great figures in the Arthurian myth or any other valid mythology, the myth is our own story. We are the knight. We have to find the lion. We have to avail ourselves of the interior mercurial helpers. We have to begin to lead the symbolic life and receive the kind of inspiration that will continue to assist us in our individuation, in our transformation, in our reunion, in the ultimate hero's gamos, the holy wedding with the, let's say, with the oppositional principles of our soul. So we are on our way to do that. But we have to be very careful not to be drawn into the world, not to, especially these days, not to be drawn into the shibboleths, the preoccupations, the nonsense of a materialistic society led by its materialistic science, but rediscover all those portions of ourselves which, as one of the Gnostic Gospels said, have been scattered abroad and which have to be gathered together. Because as our remote forefathers and foremothers, who are really our grandparents, our parents are the Greeks, the philosophers, spiritual parents, intellectual parents, but our archetypal ultimate parents are the ancient Egyptians. And as we see there, everything is to be gathered together. And the lion-headed God attaches itself to us and helps us and leads us to our ultimate destiny. We have to be aware. We have to be we have to have the kind of sight that allows us to see the lion and allow us to come to the point where we are able to unite all of these together and walk off into the ineffable greatness from whence we have come and whither we must return. So this is the last big story. It's a long story, it's a big story, and now we will conclude our Arthurian ruminations with this evening, and we will take a look at the principles of the modern interpretation of mythology as taught by Campbell, who was certainly one of the greatest teachers along this line, and where I think we can learn a great deal more. So I hope I didn't keep you too doggone long this time, and thank you very much.